Hello there and welcome to my channel. My name is Chris, this is KGS Photo. Today we're going to go over my top 5 photography composition elements, stuff that I look for when I go out there to shoot landscapes. There are a ton of things you can look for when you go out there to take a landscape shot, something to make your photo interesting and not just plain or flat or bland or boring. And these are my 5. I probably use more than 5, but these are probably the 5 that I go to the most. Number 1, leading lines. Leading lines are probably one of my favorite composition elements that I utilize to make interesting photos. This shot here, taken on a trail in the Olympic National Park in Washington, it's pretty straightforward. We had great sunlight coming through the trees in the distance. The trail was nice and straight. I mean, you got everything there. Here's another leading line idea. Same type of thing, it's straightforward. You got the waterfall in the distance. This is Tagonic, I hope I'm saying it right, Falls, outside of Ithaca, New York. You got the waterfall in the distance. That's got a line going from the horizon above down into the gorge. You got the water rushing at you, leading line. Green everywhere. It's a great shot, and your eye gets drawn to the leading line of the falls coming down or the river going towards the falls, coming away from the falls. And here's one more leading line example. This one's even more obvious than the other two because it's an actual architecture. The boards give you lines, the railings give you lines. Going out to the lighthouse, there's a lighthouse, for the life of me I can't remember what the name of it is, but it's up in Maine. And lighthouse at sunset, beautiful lines, even caught the light beaming back at the camera. Those are some examples of leading lines. Leading lines are pretty straightforward. You'll notice them pretty immediately when you're out there taking pictures. They could be man-made, they could be naturally made, they could be straight at you, they could be S-bends, roadways, rivers, down logs, anything like that. Stairwells, architecture. Leading lines, I think those are pretty simple, but they're pretty powerful to bring a viewer into your photo. Now, number 2 would be natural shapes. Natural shapes being rocks, boulders, bushes, trees, mountains. Natural shapes. Let's look at some examples. Okay, natural shapes. Well, natural shapes and leading lines can coexist. Every picture can have all these things, none of these things, one of these things, 3 of these things, whatever. Here you go. Natural shapes. This twisted up tree is a great mix of natural shapes with the branches all mangled and twisted around and the leaves and everything above the sky. And they also do bring in leading lines. Here's another example of natural shapes. You got the Grand Teton Mountains in the background with a little bit of the morning sunlight hitting them. Your mid-ground is the trees. You got the lake or the river here, the reflections. Your foreground, you got the grass. Everything's kind of working together. You got a lot of natural shapes going on here. Not too much leading lines. It's more of the natural shapes and the reflection working everything. And here is one more natural shape example. This photo is Jordan Pond in Acadia National Park up in Maine. Well, this is a night shot with moonlight, so it is pretty bright for a night shot, but we had the clouds moving in, a little bit of star trails, but your natural shapes. You got long exposure, you got all these boulders sticking up out of the pond here, a little bit of leading lines even playing in, and you got the leading lines of the mountains in the distance, natural shapes of the bubbles. Number 3 is symmetry, and I guess a lot of my photos are usually symmetrical, and a lot of my photos have a lot of leading lines, and those are probably one and the same. The line, the symmetry, I like things to be down the middle. I like to have balance in the photos. I guess everybody kind of does. This makes you feel calm. It's a calming look. So let's take some looks at symmetry examples. Symmetry in your photographs. This one is, I guess, a bit of minimalism and a bit of symmetry. No leading lines. There are natural shapes. The island, the clouds, the straight horizon. So this is on a boat out in Alaska going into Glacier Bay National Park, and just something about the storm clouds in the distance and that lonely little island right on the horizon line, nothing else around. Pretty symmetrical, straight down the middle though. So the balance is all in the middle. Your focus is in the middle. Most of the time, you don't want to put your main subject in the middle, but this was what I really wanted to make this picture look like. And symmetry makes me feel like it's in balance. Here is another symmetry example in your photography. These are some sea stacks out in Cannon Beach in Oregon. Yes, they're not identical, but you got a sea stack on the right, a sea stack on the left, something in the middle. It has a balance to it. Nothing seems to be too weighted on one side or the other. Nice reflections in the ocean. We got sunset, of course, going on, so that makes everything look prettier. Symmetry is pretty easy to find out there, especially if you're shooting in nature. Nature has a lot of patterns, repeating patterns, a lot of natural objects, tree, 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 rock, rock, rock. And here's a final example of a symmetrical picture. Also a little bit of framing. This is in Princeton University, walking around the grounds there. And, well, of course, architecture is easy to get symmetry because usually buildings are built balanced. You don't have a lopsided house, hopefully. But symmetry here. The ribs in the architecture, the ceiling, the tiles, and then this framing, symmetry, leading lines going through that framing. We've gone through leading lines. We've gone through natural shapes, and we've gone through symmetry, using those elements to get interesting photos. Now let's go into golden hour, magic hour. Whether it's sunrise, sunset, dusk, twilight, dawn, you're going to have great colors if you're shooting in color. You're going to have great shadows and contrast if you're shooting in black and white. So let's take a few examples. I'll show them to you, and you'll see what I'm talking about. Golden hour. Here is sunrise, Yosemite National Park in California, taken from Tunnel View, where everyone on Earth tries to get to because it is an amazing location. This shot, we had to get up super early and drive pretty much in the dark on mountain roads all the way into the valley of Yosemite. And yeah, I waited. Thankfully, this cloud bank that's really heavy in the sky, at least the sunset gave me something before it went up into the clouds. There was no color, there was no light, there was no shadows. But this shot really paid off. I had seen other photographers take shots like this with the sun coming up behind the mountains, behind El Capitan. And I finally got my version of it, and I was pretty happy with it. It came out nice. We shot a bunch when I was there, and this was one of my favorites. But again, this is shooting in golden hour, magic hour, sunrise. You're almost guaranteed, as long as the weather holds up, to have great colors, great contrast. You can make a pretty awesome picture, even in the worst of places. This is sunrise again. I would love to go out and shoot sunrise more often, but just getting up and getting to the places to shoot these things, it's such a pain. That's why most things would be sunset, but sunrise always seems to make a prettier picture than sunset, in my opinion. But then again, whatever you can get to, it's a good picture. So this is the sun rising up behind the buildings. This is from a distance on the Jersey Shore on the beach, looking looking south? No, I'm sorry, looking north towards Atlantic City. So the sun coming up behind the Atlantic City skyline. Great reflections. I like the soft tones, the fog off the ocean kind of blowing out, but not an amazing color because it was just a very warm morning, no clouds, but a very cool look with the sun coming from behind the buildings. One last example of shooting in golden hour, magic hour. This is a sunset. So this Jersey Shore sunset on the bay in Seaside Park, I believe it was. Love everything that's going on here. Only once in a while you can be out there and catch such amazing colors other than just yellows and oranges or the hazy sky, especially in late summer. But this panned out really well. I got lucky to be there, and I'm lucky I had my camera equipment with me because I wasn't even out to shoot. I was out at work. So great shot. Leading line, obviously. A couple of little repeating shapes, not natural, but man-made. An amazing color, reflecting from the sky to the water, cotton candy type colors. This is what you go out in the morning and why you go out at night. Just before sunset, just before sunrise, this is why you go out there, because you're hoping to catch this type of look, these type of colors. It's pretty magical. We've gone through 4 of my top 5, the things that I use, things that I look for when I go out to take pictures, landscape shots. This is number 5. Number 5 is more for black and white photography. And I love taking black and white photography. I mean, of course, I shoot in color on a digital camera and convert it to black and white. But it's a whole other thing when you want to look for black and white. You want harsh shadows, you want texture, details, because you don't have color to rely on to get your picture across. So let's take a look at a few examples of using harsh lighting, harsh shadows, and contrast to make interesting black and white photos. So here's a prime example of using contrast and shadows to make a really interesting black and white shot. Also with texture, of course, from the cement and the stonework. This was a hard shot to take, only because it was such a busy location full of tourists. I had to wait for no one to be in the hallways, no one to be blocking the sunlight coming through the windows, and I couldn't use a tripod, so it was kind of shooting with high ISO and low f-stop and all the stuff you don't really want. I'd rather use a tripod, but it came out great. The second example of using shadows and contrast and a bunch of other stuff to make an interesting shot. This is up in Yoho National Park, right next to Banff National Park. This is actually British Columbia, I believe, not Alberta. But this is Emerald Lake, early morning, super early morning, and it's just all the fog, the reflections, leading lines coming from a couple different things, natural shapes everywhere, again, reflections, but the texture of this canoe, the water texture reflecting, it's a pretty magical shot. Love the place. We stayed there for a few days so I could get shots, so I didn't have to drive in the middle of the night, dodging bears and whatever else is crawling around on those highways. For a final example of using contrast and shadows, harsh lighting to make interesting black and white shots, to bring up the textures in your photos when you're doing black and white. This is at Yaquina, I hope I'm saying that right, Headlight House. It's in Newport, Oregon, on the coast there, on the Pacific coast. But took this in color, took it black and white. Color one I like because it is golden hour and the light is coming harsh from the west. But in black and white you could just see all the, I don't know if they're lava rocks, but they sure felt like it. They were sharp, black, and giant. But these rocks, the boulders, everything throwing shadows, the shadow of the cove below the lighthouse. Again, texture, contrast, harsh shadows. You got leading lines, lots of repeating shapes. You got a man-made shape. It's, I guess it's got a little bit of everything. That was number 5. That was using contrast and shadows, texture to make black and white photos. Or even color photos, if you want to make that kind of look with the harsh shadows coming through. So, let's go through it again. My top 5 things in photography composition elements that I look for when I go out there to take pictures. Number 1 was leading lines. Number 2, natural shapes or even man-made shapes. Number 3 is symmetry or balance in your photos. Number 4 would be obviously magic hour, whether it's sunrise, sunset, dusk, dawn, twilight, anything you want to think of that's got that sharp light, the harsh light coming at you, sideways, into your camera, behind you, whatever you can get. Number 4. And number 5 is your contrasting shadows and using texture and those contrasts and shadows to make good black and white photos or interesting black and white photos. And I mean, your best lighting, if you want to, is you can shoot black and white during magic hour. You'll get those things, or even high sun, cloudy days. It's you go out there and you shoot. What are some of the photography elements and composition elements that you use when you go out there? Is it these 5? Tell me, do you use them? Do you find it easy for you to go out there and find them? That's fine. Leave a comment below and we'll see, maybe you can teach me something, because I'm pretty focused on these 5 things. So, do you use these? Do you use others? What are they? Let me know. Make sure you like and subscribe and hit the bell, and just remember, you're not going to get any better unless you go out there and just shoot something. So have fun shooting and be safe.